Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Now What podcast. My name is Glenn Sharp. I am the president and CEO of Sharp Leadership Development. Today's podcast is a little bit different. We are going to be exploring the counseling session. Yes, the dreaded counseling session. I don't know what you want to call it, a corrective action session, coming to Jesus session, whatever you want to call it. This is where you have to bring an employee into your office or at your desk and you have to correct their behavior. And if any of you have ever tried this or experienced this, you know how difficult it is. So we're going to go through the 5 steps to a counseling session today. This is also in my book, Now What. If you haven't picked it up yet, please go ahead and do so. For those of you that are not familiar with it, it's about Johnny. He's the character in the book, and I coached Johnny over a 4-month period on all the different skills necessary to get him on a level playing field with his peers. He's a brand new manager. He was an amazing mechanic. Because he was so good at being a mechanic, they made him manager of mechanics. Now what? He doesn't have the skills to be a manager. And this is one of the skills that I taught Johnny during the course of our coaching session. And it really did serve him well because he had a few employees where he had to correct their behavior. So let's go through this step by step. This is something that not only do I teach in the classroom environment, but in years past I have had the pleasure of being a keynote speaker in many different symposiums and summits, and corrective action, counseling, conflict management. All these topics are very requested from my clients, as well as starting off the year off right as a keynote. So let's go ahead and get to the counseling session here. I want you guys to imagine that over here where I'm pointing is the only exit to my office. That this is my office, as special as it is, with golf clubs in the back and a banner to my right. Imagine this is my office. You see here the 3 chairs. My left hand is on one chair. Obviously, that's another chair. And then you have a 3rd chair in the room as well, where the Now What book is located. So my question is, where does the employee sit and where does the manager sit? And for me in my classes, what I challenge people to think about is the employee always sits closest to the exit. But there's a reason why. I want you to understand the psychological reason why. Let me give you an example. If any of you guys remember Circuit City, if you've ever done research on that, they used to be the competitor of Best Buy. They're no longer in existence. But as they were kind of going down in flames and losing a lot of money, they had what we call in accounting employee theft. In accounting, it's called shrinkage. So a lot of employee theft going on. So they brought a bunch of loss investigators in and tried to get their money back. And some of the loss investigators literally were like, if we don't get our money back, you're not going anywhere. And that's illegal. You can't do that. That's entrapment. For some, that might even be kidnapping. Right? You'll get into legal entanglements. So the reason why I have the employee sit closest to the door is I want to take that all out of the equation. I want the employee to feel as if they can leave anytime that they want. All right? So that's the reason why the employee sits closest to the door. Now, in classes, for some individuals, like for example, some of the young ladies in classes, they raised their hand and they said to me, Glenn, that's easy for you to say. I'm 120 pounds soaking wet, and some of the people that I have to counsel are awfully big. If you are not comfortable with them sitting closest to the door and you want to sit closest to the door, that's just the way I do it. All right? I understand if you want to sit closest to the door, whatever makes you comfortable. But that's the reason why I have the employee sit closest to the door. There's also a 3rd chair in the room. And the 3rd chair is for the observer. Now, please keep in mind that the observer does not speak during the counseling session. Outside of initial pleasantries and introducing each other, they do not speak. The observer is for both our benefits, mine and the employee. All right? They are a protector for both of us. So I don't want them to speak because, number one, I don't want it to be a bully session and a 2-on-1 type of situation. But also, I want to make sure that they understand that they're there for them just as much as they're there for me. Back in the day when I used to manage a Toys R Us location, I remember I had a young lady who disrespected me on the floor, and I brought her into my office and I read her the riot act. and she accused me of sexual harassment. Now, what's my recourse? Right? It was just me and her. I had no third party in the room. That's the reason why I use a third party. Now, unbeknownst to this young lady, there was someone in the counting room on the other side. If you guys remember the Toys R Us format, it was a warehouse type format, and there was definitely a gap between the door jamb and the ceiling. So someone in the counting room overheard our conversation and they corroborated my story. But what if they didn't? What if they weren't counting in that room? It would have been a he said, she said type of situation. And I probably wouldn't have gotten fired for it, but there would have been a notation in my file. And, in order to establish a track record. But that's not what I'm worried about. What I was worried about is what happens when she goes back to the employee population, and if she's willing to lie to the higher ups in regards to me, what do you think she's going to tell the employee population when she gets back? I don't think it's a stretch to say that she would embellish just a bit. So that's the reason why I have a third party in the room. Now the rule is if you're anywhere uncomfortable at all, if you feel any discomfort at all, have a third person in the room. There have been times where I don't have a third person in the room. It's a very lighthearted or first-time offense, and it's just me and that employee, and it's not necessary. But if you have any doubt, like for example, in food service, the rule is when in doubt, throw it out. Well, if there's any doubt at all during the counseling session and you're uncomfortable at all, have a third person in the room. Typically, I have the third person in the room be one position higher up than the actual employee. And the reason why is I want someone, a member of management or an assistant manager, or even someone from another department in here. The theory is that if it's a member of management or someone one level up from the employee, that they're less likely to share the contents of the actual session. I want this to be anonymous. Please make sure you have a plan going into this session. History is filled with individuals that just would wing it, and they would run into a manipulator or somebody who's very good at this, has been involved with a counseling session before, and they really just got eaten alive. So have a plan. Understand that this is a very tough skill to learn, and if I were you, I would definitely be in this third chair whenever I could, watch and listen to people who do it well. But I've learned from people who don't do it well. There have been times where I've been in this third chair and I literally looked at the person who was the manager and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't believe they just said that to the employee. So I've learned from what not to do just as much as I've learned what to do. Step one is set a positive tone. Now this is nicknamed, by the way, the compliment sandwich. And this is just a nickname, but this is a pretty good plan. I have actually done this several dozen times in my career, a lot, and it has worked. But please make sure you understand that there's no methodology that works for unreasonable people. And let me make that clear. Right? I don't care what methodology you choose. If you have somebody in that chair that's just unreasonable, and I'm sure you can use your imagination what unreasonable means, there's no methodology for them. Right? There have been times in my career where I've just got up and left. I thanked them for their time and I just left because they're defiant, they're petulant, whatever you want to call it. They are just unreasonable. All right, so getting back to step number one, you want to set a positive tone. And it sounds nice setting a positive tone, but just understand why we set a positive tone. First of all, I love this employee. She's one of my staff members. I spend a lot of time with them. I love my people and I want them to succeed. And I just want you guys to understand the following. If your mindset is get them, please don't do the session. This is not a get 'em session. This is a coaching opportunity to make sure that this person corrects their behavior so they can continue on with you and they can be on your staff. Right? You want this person to succeed. You're not trying to get them. Right? So step number one is I'm going to sincerely, and I mean sincerely, don't do it unless you actually mean it. I'm going to say something along the lines of, hey, listen, first of all, before we begin, thank you for everything that you do. You've been with me for a couple of years now, and the other day I gave you an assignment. Not only did you do the assignment, but you knocked it out of the park. You did a fantastic job. Thank you for that. I had a customer compliment the other day, and they were just thrilled with the job that you did. Thank you for that. Right? I'm going to compliment them not only to set a positive tone with them in the beginning, but also understand the methodology behind this. Very typical to employees. Once they hear something derogatory, once they hear something negative, they paint themselves as, a horrible employee, right? And I want to be able to refer back to the beginning of the session and say to them, listen, this is all the things that you do well, right? We went over that in the beginning. This is one thing that I want you to work on, right? And I go back to that because I want them to make sure they remember how much I love them and how much I want them to succeed. So that's the reason why I do the step 1, and I'm sincere with step number 1. So let's go ahead and pretend that we have an individual in the room. Let's just call him Johnny, because that's the character in my book. Let's just keep it Johnny, okay? Johnny's sitting here, and Johnny has an issue, right? So Johnny does lots of things well, like we just mentioned, but he's got an issue, specifically under his arms. There's a horrible odor coming from under his arms. Personal hygiene. He smells terrible, right? You've gotten complaints from employees. You got complaints from your boss. You've got complaints from clients. You smelled it in the meeting this morning. You smelled it on the floor this afternoon, and you smell it right now. So that's the setup. Right? So step number 2, after you set a positive tone, is you're going to go directly into the actual issue. So there's 2 different ways to do this, the wrong way and the right way. Now remember, as I do it, please make sure you understand that this is the way I do it. So I have a different demeanor than you do. I have a different tone, right? I have the New York thing going on. I get it, right? So however you do it, concentrate on the steps. Don't concentrate on how I do it. To concentrate on the steps and do it to your own personality, right? Use your own words, but have a plan. So this is the wrong way to do it, in my opinion, because so many people hate conflict, and they'll say things like the following. Johnny, the reason why I brought you in is because, well, Johnny, we all have to tighten things up a little bit, and personal hygiene, you know what I'm saying? So, Johnny, I'm just, talking to everybody, letting everybody know that, we have to do our best. You know what I mean? So do your best, and that's why I'm here, okay? If you're Johnny, what are you thinking right now? You're probably wondering, what is he, nuts? What's going on with him? Or you're probably saying to yourself, I wonder who he's talking about. If you smell bad, believe it or not, you don't smell yourself. You're around that odor all the time. Remember when you were in high school? If your parents picked you up from practice, whatever sport that you play, probably the first reaction when you got in the car was, oh my God, you stink. Right? You don't even smell it. I've counseled someone on perfume before. They thought the more the better, and they didn't even realize that they were giving people headaches. So we don't want to generalize with Johnny. Be specific, be direct as best you can, because he's going to be confused, right? So here's the way I do it, and it's followed by a little bit more of an advanced concept called the power of silence. So here's how I would do it. Johnny, I brought you in here today because specifically there's an odor coming from above your arms, under your arms. Right. I smelled it in the meeting this morning. I smelled it on the floor this afternoon, and I smell it right now. You feel that uncomfortable silence? I have nothing else to say to Johnny. Now, you tell me, was that mean to say to Johnny? I would argue that that was direct, right? There's no doubt at all that Johnny knows why he's in the actual room, okay? So that's what I mean by being direct. Now, certainly I want to make sure that I'm polite. Certainly I want to make sure that I'm professional. But if you notice, I did something, other than the power of silence, I did something. I did not include all the information that I had at my disposal. I had people complaining, clients complaining, my boss complaining, and I did not use it. Why? Well, the reason why is because if I can keep it firsthand information, I always do. You have to admit, if you're Johnny and I say, I smelled it in the meeting, I smelled it on the manufacturing floor, I smell it right now, it's really hard to combat that. Very, very difficult. Right? And I'm sure there's something that Johnny could say if we really brainstormed a little bit, but you have to admit that that would be very, very difficult for Johnny. If you notice the power of silence at the end, it was deafening. I am a huge believer in the power of silence. I really am saying with the power of silence, your turn. I have nothing else to say. And then now it's time for you to speak. Now, I don't care if you raise your eyebrows, if you actually say to Johnny or say to the employee, go ahead, your turn, please, talk to me. Whatever you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with the power of silence because I think it's deafening. And I also know that some employees, they really understand that certain managers do not like silence, and they'll keep droning on. And they'll let you drone on as long as you like, all right, as long as you will. So just keep that in mind. That's kind of how I do this step 2. Step 3 is listen to their feedback. One of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years is life is not black and white. There are many shades of gray. A lot of people have some really, really horrible things going on in their life, and they have life circumstances that just absolutely devastate them. I remember one time I was counseling someone on personal hygiene, and I found out that they got kicked out of their house through no fault of their own. Their parents were just absolute nightmares. They lost the roof over their head, and they were sleeping in their car for 3 months. Now, that's not an excuse. You still have to come to work with good personal hygiene, but I certainly feel for them, and that's certainly a reason why things are happening. But I can certainly deal with that. One of the things I want you guys to think about right now is if you are in this chair, okay, and Johnny says something to you that you are totally unprepared for, like I have a new dietary type of situation, or I have a medical situation, or a religious situation, something along those lines, and you are not prepared for that, please don't take a shot at it. Please just don't try to muddle through it if you don't know what you're talking about. This is where it's very easy to stop and say, listen, I'm not prepared for this. Let me go contact HR. Let me contact legal. Let me contact someone in another department so I can get more information, and we will continue it. Please do not try to continue without knowing what you're doing, because that could turn into an absolute nightmare and a dumpster fire. All right, so that would be step 3. We're listening to their feedback. In this particular case, Johnny got kicked out of his home. He's living out of his car. So step 4 is form an action plan. All right. So if this is just like a first-time offense, I'm probably just going to have a verbal exchange with Johnny. And believe me, I'm going to have him repeat back to me what the plan is once we formulate it. But if this is a more formal offense, if it's a second-time offense, if it's a more severe topic, not only am I going to have a third person in the room, but I am also going to make sure it's written documentation. By the way, Johnny's coming up with the plan. All right, Johnny, if it's written, he is going to actually write the plan down, and we'll both sign it. Right, I will staple it or paperclip it to the actual write-up, and in the file it goes. Right? So for Johnny's sake, with his situation with being kicked out of his house, I like to give him options. Right? In step 4, I'll say to Johnny something along the lines of, listen, I understand your situation. Believe me, I get it. But you can't come to work this way. Let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about what you can do. You can go to a laundromat, right, and wash your clothes. You can go to a truck stop and pay to take a shower. You can go to a YMCA and get a guest pass for $10, and you can take a shower at a YMCA. There are options for you, Johnny, and that's what I'm providing, options for him. If Johnny is defiant, for example, and he says something along the lines of, hey, listen, other people smell, other people, especially if you're in a manufacturing environment where it's hot and you are, obviously a laborer, and you've got a lot of people who are affected by weather, and it's hot in the actual hangar or hot in the warehouse, whatever. Obviously, I will let Johnny know, listen, I'm not talking to everybody, I'm talking to you. So what's the difference between you and everyone else, all right? You have to tighten it up, and you have to make sure that you understand that there's people around you, and you have to work with people. We all have to work with people, and you have to maintain a certain standard, right? So understand as well that step 4 and actual documentation, if you're in operations, I understand if you think write-ups and documentation sucks. I get it. It does suck. But it is so necessary. Please make sure you understand just how necessary documentation is. If you've ever been in front of a magistrate and you try in an unemployment hearing and you try to defend your position as an employer and you have no documentation, believe me, you have 0 shots. Right? They are pretty brutal to you if you do not have your ducks in a row, and rightly so. Right? So the reason why we do documentation is protect the company, protect ourselves, show a track record. All right, we have to have documentation. Again, I acknowledge it's not the most fun thing to do, but understand the big picture. Imagine if you're involved in a lawsuit, imagine if you're involved in an unemployment hearing or something along those lines and you don't have documentation, it's a nightmare. Right, so that is step 4. Step 5 is obviously the end of the compliment sandwich. It is ending on a positive note. Right? I want Johnny to know, hey, listen, I'm there for you. Not only do I appreciate everything that you do, and I'm going to recap again everything I talked about in step 1, but I'm also going to tell him, listen, this is between us in this room and the 4 walls. No one needs to know about this, right? And I have all the faith in the world in you that you'll be able to remedy the situation. And the last thing I do is I extend my hand. Right? I shake hands with Johnny. It's a sign of respect, letting him know I love him and I want him to succeed, but also I believe in him. And that's the way I end the session. What I want from this session is I want Johnny to walk out of there and I want his words to be, wow, that was different. Like my boss really actually cares about me. That's pretty cool. Right? And that's the ultimate goal of the counseling session. There's also another concept, and I'm going to end with this. One of the reasons why I feel like I am able to do these counseling sessions without taking personally is the reason why I named it Psychology Within a Counseling Session. Right? And I want you to imagine a light over Johnny's head. Call it the light of accountability, call it whatever you want, but I recognize there's a light above his head. And when Johnny says something like, well, I don't like the way you smell, or I don't like your attitude, I see that light swing over to me. And I see, it's a psychological exercise, I see that light and I know what he's doing. I know he's trying to distract. When he says, what about Brian on 3rd shift? You know, he smokes weed in the back or something along those lines, something ridiculous. I know he's just trying to distract me. I know he's just trying to get the light off of him and onto someone else. But I see it. I see that. And when it becomes a psychological exercise, it allows me to understand what he's doing, and I'm less likely to lose emotional control. Because in some of these sessions, they can be very defiant. I actually had someone literally say to me, F you. Now I'll leave it up to you to fill in the rest of the letters. But what was he trying to do? Right? Yeah, he was defiant. Yes, he was petulant. Right? Yes, he was just unreasonable and ridiculous, but he was trying to get an emotional response to me. If I say that back to him, who do you think's in front of HR? Right? I am, because I'm the manager and I am held to a higher standard. And he knows that. So he's trying to bait me. And if I understand, if I see that light and I see it swinging over to me, I'm going to swing it right back to him. I'm going to say things like, I'm sorry you feel that way, and excuse me, I'm going to end this meeting and let's go ahead and talk another time. Now, believe me, you're not allowed to say that to your boss. The person was fired, right? I don't want that type of person on my team. But if he starts to blame others, like Brian on 3rd shift, I'll say, we're not talking about Brian. If he starts to say, I don't like your attitude, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we're not talking about me. We're talking about you. I'm swinging that light back over to him. So I want you to understand that whether you use my 5 steps, whether you use your own, have a plan going in. Use your own demeanor, use your own personality, but have a plan. I know for a fact that this works. I challenge my classes all the time. Prove to me, or give me an example, or give me a reason why this would not work, these 5 steps. And they really struggle not to. Now, they come up with some unreasonable scenarios, and I remind them nothing works on an unreasonable person. Right? But for the most part, this works and works really, really well. Have someone on your department help you. I find it very, very helpful to have somebody role play with me. And I don't really like to role play like actual role play. I'll get in a room with someone and be like, hey, hit me with the toughest question, or let's go back and forth. What's the hole in my argument? What's the thing that would throw me off? And we'll go through an exercise like that, and it really prepares me well. And that's what I would suggest for you. So I hope this helps. I hope the compliment sandwich and the 5 steps to a counseling session helps you. As I stated earlier, practice this. This does not come naturally to most people. I remember when I was a young 20-year-old manager, if I could go back in time and watch myself do my first session, I probably would close my eyes because I was terrible at it. But nobody ever trained me on how to do it. So how was I supposed to know? So if this is you and you need to practice and develop your own personality, develop your own methodology, I encourage you to continue to watch the video and to have others help you out and watch others in that third chair. As I mentioned, I hope this video is helpful to you. I wish you all the luck in the world in your management leadership journey. And in our next session, episode 9, we're going to get into public speaking in the context of holding a meeting, something which I trained Johnny on in the book. So once again, if you haven't picked up the book, please go ahead and do so. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think your employees will really enjoy it, especially it being the end of the year, and it's a great way to get your employees on the right footing in the new year, hitting the ground running in 2026. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in episode 9.